Okay, welcome back. We are learning from Rousseau, and here we are. This is us in the demo class setup, and this is where the painting is at the moment. Last episode we looked at the positioning of the flowers and some of the colour choices and some of the decisions that were made round about it. And now we're going to focus on painting this figure here, the female and also the male figure. Okay, so we'll just scoot across to the fill-in class. Let's see if we can call it up. And let's see, just a moment. We had rehearsed this. Here we go. Okay. Refresh and scoot across. Okay. So, we are going to paint the figures. And a lot of thought went into this. I wanted the female figure to be black, and having thought about it for a while, it wouldn't work. This is the wrong video. Over to Minicam. Rousseau figures, here we go. My apologies to anybody watching. We're going to be painting the Rousseau figure. And let's check that we're queued up. Yes, we are. Yeah, we're going to be painting the female figure. And I've tried to take her stance, if you like, her position on the couch as a relative copy of Rousseau's. But I went through some angst about what colour to use. I really wanted a black figure to be served by a white musician. I wanted to turn the tables there for the power table there for my own interest, my own point of view. And I realised that by making the figure black or strongly dark, it would get lost against the couch. I would have to change the colour of the couch, and that would change the balance between the couch and the rest of the forest that had been built up. I thought about blue for the same reason, but then I thought that the balance of the blue would it just didn't work. And so I resolved upon trying to emulate something that Rousseau had done with his painting. So this is where we're at. The figure is going to be altered slightly, and you can see that the figure that Rousseau has painted is a female form, but it's a kind of fetishized version of the female form with an awkward angle, a particularly triangular hip, and a wasp-like waist, which looks decidedly uncomfortable. But that's how he painted his image, and I am, for the sake of this painting, going to try to replicate it or something like it in my own. Off screen, just below the picture by Rousseau, you can see me mixing up a skin tone there. You can just make it out. I've used titanium white and I've used yellow ochre. And a little bit of the red, and the red that I've been favouring so far has been the magenta, and that will be tempered by the blue underpainting, and we'll see that as we go along. Okay. I am starting with the area underneath the neck. And this area for me is a little bit different from the original, so there needs to be a slight redrawing. And also I want to get a little bit of the base colour down first of all. So I suppose in some sense I have made the equivalent of a Naples yellow by using titanium white, so much white to the yellow ochre. But what I'm trying to do is build up the form through light and shadow. Now, the blue form is automatically shadow, and so by bringing in light, by painting the skin tone that I've created, I'm building in light. I'm painting light onto that surface. Now that waspish waist is very, very high on the original. I've lowered it to become a little bit more realistic. So the belly on his is very compressed. I've kind of lengthened the belly, leading down to the pubic area, a little bit more elongated and perhaps a little bit more realistic. I've left a blue separation for the breasts so that we can see their form. And now I'm redrawing to try and correct that area, that side of the body, to the extended left arm. It's just a little bit wrong. Blocking in the belly. So basically what I'm doing is a very, very flat drawing. Now I can see from my final copy I've fetishized the hip area and the curves a little bit more than Rousseau has done, but it's not realism. It's, in a sense, it's surrealism. It's based on reality, but it's an altered reality. So the light under the neck has removed any shadow that creates a separation between the jawline and the upper part of the chest. This is a problem. My version so far is quite flat, so what I resolved upon doing was cleaning off the brush and removing material. So the paint is very opaque at this stage, quite thickly applied and opaque, but I can create a sense of shading by lifting out with a clean brush. So off screen, I can wipe the excess paint off the brush, and when I revisit an area, instead of putting paint on, instead of applying paint, I will be removing paint, and that will allow the blue to come through and create the illusion of a shadow. And by doing that, we will render the form as slightly more 3D. So right now I'm using the embossing tool to scrape back the paint. It actually removes paint to draw in details that I feel I need. And I think at this point, because I'm doing my narration, I'm doing the voiceover retrospectively due to some technical issues I've mentioned. I think I'm just going to be painting all the highlights on the side that should be facing the sun. But it's improbable that a figure would be that well lit with the sun going down and the moon being in place. So, especially since the couch itself would be casting its own shadow on the figure. So, The thing I like about this is that there is some reality. It is figurative, the work, but it's not tied to photorealism or any such constraint. So my lightest value is going in. This is very, very pale. On the Rousseau painting, I see a kind of greenish cast, which is fairly reasonable since she's surrounded by forest. I'm not going to try to replicate that. I'm kind of hoping that when the blue comes through this mix that I've made, that the blue seen through the layer of yellow ochre and titanium white will have that kind of cast, but I failed to make a copy of it. But I'm not trying to make an exact copy, I'm just trying to learn from his work. Now, the leg that is uppermost, the knee was wrong in mine, so with this layer of paint I've tried to correct it, and I've also tried to make the other leg sort of work with the new arrangement that I've made, with the painting that I've made. I'm painting very, very carefully, trying to leave a separation between both legs. But the hip is much more angular. That's my painting. But I'm happy to say that the knee, I feel, is slightly more convincing. It's more plausible. It's in a much more realistic position. And then I can go and work on the shin and the calf down to the foot. So I believe there I was trying to lift out some material so you can see the blue coming out, and this is creating the shade on the belly where it meets the groin and on the underside of the leg to give a kind of rounded form. So there's a V shape there for the belly that I'm trying to bring out by lifting out material. You can see that the blue comes out and creates a kind of shadow area. If I'd used a dark green underpainting, that I believe is called verdaccio, and when you add the pink skin tones, they kind of neutralise each other out and give a very reasonable skin tone. But my blue will work. It just means my figure looks a little bit cooler. Then I'm putting the shade under the breasts and between them by lifting out material, but trying to do it in as subtle a way as possible. I don't want bands or stripes of blue, so I've got to be careful to remove enough material that it renders the form 3D, but not so much that I actually wreck the layer that I've created. And here, now, the shadow area under the chin and the neck area and the upper portion of the chest. Similarly, I'm using a Rosemary and Co ivory short flat brush, and it's doing the work quite nicely of removing the material and creating a kind of shadow area there. But now I'll have to give attention to painting the face and painting the arms in a believable way. Removing material from the underside of the lower leg. And again. So it may take several passes to remove enough of the top layer to allow the lower underpainting to influence it. So, and this wasn't, I mean, I just mapped the figure in with blue because blue is what I had and it's what I felt like using at the time. So again, try to correct that belly. And soften some of the transitions because they were a little bit abrupt. And I knew also that, once this stage was completed, and it is, the painting is beside me even as I speak, that once it's dry, it is possible to actually glaze over, scumble some glazes of different colours to make the skin a little bit more believable. When I look at Rousseau's original, I can actually now see hints of orange and just other colours. There's hints of orange and hints of green, which are lacking from mine. So maybe next time. So here, trying to re-establish some of the form from what I've removed by redrawing the waist. And extending that leg so that it looks as if it goes under and into shadow. Now when I look at mine, the leg that I've created crosses a little bit higher up than on Rousseau's. So okay, we can just see what I was doing there. I was correcting a line, clearly. So, when do we address the arms and the lower legs and the face? Okay, we're on the knee, working on the calf, all the way down to the foot. And the foot is just blocked in as a sort of spatula kind of shape. Trying to put a highlight on that hip because it's nearest the light source, such as it is. And other areas that also need highlights. Yes, it's a balancing act between removing enough material and reinstating material that has been lost to get the right sense of transitioning. So, kneecap coming down the front side of the shin now, back to the calf and hopefully down to the foot. And at this stage, it's still a kind of blocking in. I'm trying to correct my drawing so that it works on the, the surface that I've created. And now that I look at it from a little distance removed, a little bit of paint spill. Wear gloves. Some of these cadmiums and titaniums are heavy metals and they're not good for handling, so I chastise myself and I will be purchasing gloves soon. Okay, the light balance is not right, so I'm trying to correct the material that I've removed. And onto the crossover foot. So I've got a kind of spade shape or kind of spatula shape, which has just been blocked in. I can revisit this with details and lifting out. So basically the techniques are lifting out with a dry, clean brush, maybe a brush that you've dedicated just for that purpose. Okay. It looks like I spotted my mistake, and tried to lengthen the leg on the underside a tad. So the blue will help give the illusion that the one leg passes under the other leg, and the blue will help cast that shadow. I saw a little triangle on the belly, or a little shield shape on the belly that I wanted to put in. Back into the mix. Again, trying to correct that shape. And now that I see that it's a little bit too angular, I may actually correct it by painting the couch. Or her hair cascades down between herself and the couch under her left arm, so I could actually revisit that a little bit more. I do paint her hair in, but not so far as to correct that hip outline, so that's something that I might do in the final episode. Although this is the last day of May, and this was May's project, so I may have to carry it over into June a tad. Having a technical issue with my recording meant that I had to spend other days doing this voiceover, and so some painting time was lost. And if I'm being fair, I would say that I prefer painting to editing or revoicing. So here what I'm doing is using my kind of Naples mix to create a profile. I'm doing it very, very carefully, just little by little, because and the right shoulder, where the highlights are impossible, because that area would be in shade. But we're kind of bending the rules a little bit, just playing with paint and playing with the form. So, the profile, very, very tricky. I had to extend the forehead to make it work, and I also have to make the junction between the jaw line and the chin and the shadow area under the neck has got to work. And so I'm kind of blocking that in. My angle is slightly shallower, I can see. But compared with the blocked in blue face, we now have something which is more akin to a human face. What I'm trying to do is fill in the profile, but deviate it slightly to create the kind of scoop of a cheek that a cheek would have. So I'm trying to put a little bounce on that edge there. And then I notice that the hairline goes back towards the ear and creates a kind of obtuse triangle with the ponytail dropping down, or the tresses of hair dropping down. So there's a kind of tear duct shaped where I wanted the cheek to be, and that's kind of lost, but it was there as a guide for me to go back and to check. So a little bit more of an angle there, make it slightly more acute. There we are. And we have a reasonable face. Now, with the arm that is stretched over the couch, in Rousseau's original, her hand is open and facing towards the viewer. So in my one, what I've done is I've kind of rotated her arm around. It wasn't a planned decision, but as I was painting it, I thought with the block in that I've got, I could easily just turn that hand around and she would be shooing the musician away, like she doesn't want to be bothered or pestered. And that's okay. It's using the motif, but it's also adapting it to my own interests and ends. So there is a bit of a power balance here as well, is that the woman is clearly the power figure over the male figure. And I quite like that in my painting. So this is novel for me, because usually in my works, especially with the elastomorphs you may have seen in the previous month's works and on my YouTube channel, there tend not to be figures. And it's not that I don't like painting figures. This one was It was quite fun actually painting this one. Getting from a block into something that was more akin to an actual form. So I've said before about look for the triangles, so I can see triangles at the top of the breasts to create a kind of teardrop, pendulous kind of shape. And the triangles I learnt from my own studies into John Bellamy. So always look for the triangles is something that I tell myself. And as I'm blocking in or painting mine, I'm trying to look for shapes. And then work from the big shapes down to the small shapes. But when you're working just about slightly over A4, there's not a lot of room for error. And when you're painting small details in a small space, the problem is amplified. Okay, now I'm beginning to get the sense of light and shade. The balance is a little bit better because the more opaque layers are becoming slightly more pronounced, slightly stronger, and by doing that it means that the shadow areas have become intensified just by adding that extra paint layer on. So colour is all relative. As we put colour on our painting, it influences how we perceive the colours round about it. So, yes, it was fun trying to create a figurine rather than a figure. But that was quite enjoyable, and I am inclined to paint some more figurative work soon. Had this month gone a little bit better, there was a plan to do this painting, but I didn't realise that Rousseau had so many lessons to teach me. I was going to do a copy of a painting by Frida Kahlo, which has a jungle, because I'm learning to paint these floriforms and jungles, especially jungles of the imagination. So I got kind of sidetracked from that because this one proved to be so involved. I'm quite happy with the shaping of this arm. I got really, really lucky with the light and shadow, and it just in a few short strokes created some subtle movement in that arm. So I'm quite pleased with that. And again, there's not a lot of paint on the brush. In fact, I'm probably moving paint around that's already been laid or lifting out rather than actually applying opaque layers. Okay, so there's some softening of the areas there. So okay, and again lifting out some paint material to dig down to the blue to create a very subtle hollow of the cheek there. That's it. The second pass has revealed it a little bit better. And now I can see a kind of awkward, an awkward triangle, which is tidied up. An awkward triangle forming at near her jugular on that side, which has been softened a little bit. And the face built in. Shadow area created for the socket, for the eye. And then some other details are, first of all, drawn in using the Derwent embossing tool, one of my favourite tools. So, since I've started recording these studio practice sessions, I think there hasn't really been a painting that I haven't used the sgraffito technique in, so I think it's possibly a signature technique for me. Okay. Variety. So instead, using a graphite pencil to draw in the mouth, and do I do a V for the eye socket? Okay, a little touch there. And correcting that jugular as well, just softening that area. I think later on I paint more hair anyway, which helps to soften that area and add more visual interest. So, this is atypical for me. I don't normally paint like this. Normally I paint a layer and stop, let it dry, and then paint another layer on top. So this idea of working, I know that I'm putting wet paint on top of a dry layer, the dry blue layer, but then I'm subsequently painting other layers on top of the wet layers. So I'm more working in a way that is more akin to working wet on wet. So it's something that I don't do enough of. And if I was challenging myself, for instance, the whole reason for learning from Rousseau is to challenge my comfort zone by trying to paint in a different style so that I can increase my creative repertoire. So I think it would be a developmental thing for me to try to paint wet and wet in an alla prima one sitting session. Okay, I can see that that hip is just growing and growing, and my daughter has pointed it out to me that I was creating unrealistic body standards. My daughter is lovely and intelligent and quite right. So I may have to go back and correct that. Although I kind of like the way that the pose is actually awkward on the couch. I don't know what it says for the painting, whether or not it adds drama or not. Okay. Trying to soften the contours of, there's a kind of Y shape that needs to be softened a little bit more. And in some way I've lost some of the modelling of the form of the lower leg. So I think it would be necessary to remove some material. Having said that, it's in the naive style, so, and I have alluded already that I could correct that with glazes. I can influence it a little bit more. But I think the learning that I've gotten, a belly button. Now I'm trying to see if if there's a belly button on Rousseau's original, and I think I can detect one. But having said that, that reminds me that, having the two figures in this space, it does have a kind of Garden of Eden sense. Which is not so evident. I don't get that impression from looking at Rousseau's, but when I look at my own one, I do get the feeling of a kind of Garden of Eden and an Adam and Eve there. So trying to elongate the foot a little bit longer, put in some toes, we need the big toe, and I know for a fact that the detailing of these toes is created by embossing, using an embossing tool. And I did have to check that the big toes were on the correct side, especially when I go to paint the other foot, the one that's on the underside. So from trying to make the first indication of toes, I'm now going over to the hand and painting it in such a way that the pinky is uppermost and the back of the hand is towards us. So it's the reverse of Rousseau's version, shooing the musician away. Sorry about the positioning of the picture, but that was to help me have my reference photo. I think I make a little bit of pink here from the palette to suggest the redness of the lips. A little bit of red on the cheek. And I must go back at some point and put in a black eyebrow or some dark for an eyebrow. So, yes, a little bit more research of figurative painting shows that the female, so if you look at Venuses are all very light and pale, and that's their colouring. And if you look at Mars for men, they're a little bit more reddish. And so when I go on to paint the male figure, I have to change the colour mix so that his skin tones, while being viewed in a dark forest, are still a little bit more ruddy, a little bit more redder than his Venus counterpart. So revisiting the pink areas, especially on the mouth. I think maybe Sgraffito scratches down to the dark layer for the eye and the eyebrow. Time will tell. But the toes, I'm now going on to the smallest of my rigger brushes. You can count them. 1, 2, 3, on to the third one, 4, and so the big toe must be repositioned. So if you saw the episode before, when there are tiny little details like this, I sometimes use the ferrule of the brush, that's the metal bit that separates the wood from the hair of the brush. So I use that as a kind of loading area. So I put some paint on it, rinse out or wring out the paint from the hairs of the brush as you pick it up from the palette, and scrape it into a little bundle. And from that I can get a little pea, a little tiny little peck of paint to paint tiny little details. But here I'm braving it and just trying to pick up colour from the palette. And now I must have added a little bit more of that magenta into the skin tone. I'm wanting certainly a more ruddy colour for the male than the female, but only just slightly. So in with the forehead. So by putting a light patch for the forehead, we immediately cast shade on the lower area. The light, such as it is, may also catch the bridge of his nose. So we create a T shape which separates two darkened, sunken hollows for where the eyes should be. But we're only suggesting this. Some of the detail is lost. Using the colour to bring round to shape the face a little bit more accurately. Add ears, and by extending the face down into the chin, it creates the mouthpiece for the oboe. A little bit more clearly, and now just tiny little touches that suggest ears. The colour that is down already, which is a very muted kind of dirtied tone, will be my shadow tone. So I'm trying to imagine where the light might hit, or more accurately, where the light would inform the reader to interpret the human form. Is there a more accurate description? And so I'm highlighting the shoulder and the bicep. The hands are in a terrible state at this point, so there are plans to block in new hands for them. But I'll just go down the shoulder, down the bicep, down to the elbow on the other arm. And already the shape is a little bit more believable. I want the light to also detail where the pecs would be. And if those pecs go in or are suggested, that immediately casts a shadow under the chin and onto the neck area. So, collarbones in, and as soon as they go in, that creates a hollow. And hopefully, yep, blocking in the hands now, trying to correct the positioning of it. Now, my son is a piper and plays the bagpipes, and so, having sketched him while he's out busking, I have a little bit of a sense of how the hands relate to the, the oboe or the chanter version of this painting. The forearms need a highlight as well. So that makes that form a little bit more legible. And having tackled the female form, fingers on the upper hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. So having tackled the fingers on the upper hand, we'll have to address the other hand. So the right forearm, which is holding the lower portion of the oboe. And again, I'm widening the grip, extending the fingers a little bit to allow them to curve over the cylindrical form of the oboe. So obviously there was something needing correcting on that shoulder to suggest that the bicep makes a deviation from the shoulder joint. Okay, time for more fingers. We use the embossing tool. If you buy the Derwent set, you'll get several pencils and an eraser, and you'll get 2 of these embossing tools. and they have they're double-ended, so you get 4 different sizes of ball end on them, which you can sharpen if you want. So there's the peck going in and creating a little bit more form, a little bit more detail. I did play with the colours a little bit more, trying to make them more orangey in certain places, cooler in others. Okay, and here I think I just want to reshape the hips just by outlining them and leaving the rest of that body in shadow. I don't want to overdo that part with the detailing. So now the toes. So I just concentrate on the big toes first of all, and they get little toenails in as well. So there is part of my personality that enjoys doing these tiny little details, and it does suit my personality to hide figures inside the jungle for people to find. I thought that was fun. It was fun to paint and enjoyable as a result as well. So now scraping back to create a toe, and then filling out the toe details with tiny amounts of paint on my smallest rigger brush. I'm not sponsored by Rosemary and Co, but they have great brushes and they deliver to your door. So that's suitable for me. And in all probability, you would have seen the brushes on my left hand. I sometimes do that. I find myself just holding brushes that I'm not using in the other hand. But you can guarantee that some of that skin tone was put on the ferrule and lifted out as a little peck of colour to add those toes. If you look at Rousseau's original, there is a tiny little triangle. Look for the triangle. So which separates those 2 legs from each other. A little gap. And so I tried to use that. I tried to be informed by it. And now I'm using the embossing tool as a eraser, because there was a bit that I didn't like on the wrist, which I've managed to scrape away. And the left shooing hand, the hand that is shooing the musician away. You don't see all of the fingers, thankfully. I was actually tempted just to have the hand disappear behind the couch and save myself some details. But the shooing form suits me as well. That my dreamer in her forest doesn't want to be disturbed by anything, not the sound of human music, but perhaps the music of the rainforest itself. There, I've romanticised it for myself, giving a little narrative. There are birds in Rousseau's original. The bird that I have placed in, one of them, a toucan, is not the best songbird in the world. Now, I am unsure at this moment where we are, because the guitar needs painting, and a little bird to be positioned in the sound hole. But I can tell now by the lack of movement on the screen that some big decisions were being made. So just on the palette cam, a little bit more pink. Okay, got you. So the pink that was used on the pink parts of the female were used to soften the colour for the ocelots. Their tongues were dampened down. They were a little bit too magenta, and so I softened them a little bit with this pink. And hopefully I'm going to reduce this image back up to the top hand corner, top right hand corner, so we can see the palette cam and the work that was done on the guitar. So Also, since beginning to paint again, I had a hand injury from an assault at work, and so I'm returning to paint after a bit of a gap. The assault happened 6 months after my degree exhibition, and so the painting has been good rehab for me, and helped me recover some of the subtlety of function in my right hand. I did think for a while I wouldn't paint or play the guitar again properly, but things are okay now. And I was saying that since returning to painting, guitars have featured in the majority, if not all, of my paintings at some point. So they have become a light motif or a recurring theme in my artwork. So clearly mixing up a colour here. It's probably the hair colour. Bit of black, bit of brown. Probably the brown will be burnt umber. And also some yellow ochre to nudge that black towards becoming an olive colour. So the hair is being reshaped. There will be a few tresses. I try not to copy Rousseau's original exactly, but do something a little bit different myself. So I did notice that there was hair under her left armpit, tresses going down, which create a curtain between her and the sofa, and that should have been my chance to soften the curve of the hip. So back into that mix, almost certainly carbon black, burnt umber, and little tads of yellow ochre to nudge it towards this kind of olive colour. But also, as you can see, I'm redrawing the shape. I'm correcting the original drawing, the original block in. And now that hair gives me a chance to correct any imperfections on that drawing around her left breast and maybe under that armpit. There seems to be a little bit abrupt. So there it is. Make a little bit gentler curve there. And yeah, that's been one of the joys I've learned about using these artisan water mixable oil paints, is that they clean up with water. I'm a keen brewer, and one of my sterilising agents is absolutely phenomenal for cleaning the paint out of brushes. It's really, really good, and it doesn't involve stirring the brush on the palm of your hand or anything like that. You just drop it and float it in a container of the mix, and the paint just falls off. So anything that saves energy is a joy to me. But as I was saying, the really satisfactory thing about these oil paints is the way that you can correct things and just nudge your drawing in different directions, make corrections, overpaint. I only wish someone had sold the idea of oil paint to me a lot earlier, because I've skirted around the issue, favouring watercolours for my bird paintings. Okay, a few more tresses. Surely that has to be filled out a little bit more. Okay. Yes, I think so. And now this painting activity is as much a mystery to me as it must be to you. What am I doing? Okay, a highlight. So, yes, so that the figure can appear in front of the forest. A little bit of the same mix was added with a lot more of the yellow ochre to nudge it away from olive, away back into yellow ochre and create that highlight, which I'm now scratching into strands of hair. Some little highlights to give form to the hair as it cascades over the head and down into the shoulder, changing direction at the shoulder, scoring in some hair texture on that cascade of hair at the sofa. And again, correcting the drawing ever so slightly, ever so subtly. And the same hair colour used to give my figure a decent haircut. He's been in lockdown and clearly hasn't been to the hairdressers in a while, so now's his chance. By using this paint and bringing it down over the ears and onto the shoulders, I help to redraw the ears and the jawline and also give him a much more plausible head proportion to the body. Okay, so that's two figures. Okay, with a bit of luck now, we'll reduce the size of this Rousseau's painting so we can see more of the work. There's the mouse, so this painting should be shoved up top right. And let's check the guitar. Yep, the guitar hasn't been painted, so now what I'm going to do is work on lightening the tone of the guitar, but in such a way that there is still a distinction between the creamy underside of the ocelot and the newfound lightness of the guitar. I did study guitar construction for a while, and I know that it's symmetrical on both sides, and that is a joy that we are going to miss out on. Oh no. But let me describe how we do it. Just block in with a lighter colour, so I use a lighter version of the skin tone to block in the entire 8 shape of the guitar. And once it's all been blocked in, I just create long, thin but broken lines using the embossing tool to create the grain which forms on the guitar. Now, if you imagine the neck and continue it as a line of symmetry, I try to make the lines symmetrical on both sides. It's not always possible, but that's a useful tip for painting guitars. That's how I do mine anyway. So thank you for watching this. That was as much a surprise to me because I'd forgotten what I'd done. I hope that you found it of interest. I hope you found something that can help you and perhaps even inspire you to enjoy creativity wherever you may be. Thanks for viewing. Hope to see you in the next one.